everybody! Welcome to the Jayda InStitches show! We've got a cute and spooky Amigurumi for you today. This little ghost makes the cutest little stuffed toy. He's cute decor too if you want to put him around the house, maybe sit him on the table. And if you want to spook out your guests, you can hang him in the window. I'll show you how he looks hanging at the end of the tutorial. So, this is a scrap project. Let's grab our hooks, grab a little bit of white yarn, and head over to the craft table and make ourselves a ghost. In order to make our little ghost, we're going to need acrylic worsted weight yarn. So I've got some in white, obviously. You don't need very much. This is definitely a scrap project. Now you can also make his eyes by single crocheting them like I did, or you can do what I'm going to do today and just put on buttons. Buttons or beads make fine eyes as well. You're going to need a little bit of embroidery floss and an embroidery needle to sew on his eyes and to make his little mouth. Going to need some stuffing, a yarn needle, a pair of scissors, and I'm using a 4.25mm hook, also known as a G6. And once you've got all of those things established, we can get going. We're going to begin with a cinch circle. Chain 1, that locks your circle in place. And we're working with the single crochet. So into this cinch circle, we're going to single crochet 8. Once you've single crocheted 8 into that cinch circle, grab the short tail, cinch it shut, make sure it's nice and tight, and then we're going to continue to work in the round. So identify the first single crochet, so you can count back, make sure you've got all 8, and find the first one you made, and you're going to work 2 single crochet into it. I'm going to work over my shorter tail just so I don't confuse it. Into each one of the first 8 single crochet you made, you're going to work 2 single crochet. So we're going to increase from a stitch count of 8 in row 1 to a stitch count of 16 in row 2. So 2 single crochet in each stitch around. At the end of row 2, you should have 16 stitches. We're still increasing. We're going to work 2 single crochet into the next stitch, 1 single crochet into the next, 2, 1, 2, 1, all the way around. You're going to go from a stitch count of 16 in row 2 to a stitch count of 24 at the end of row 3. That's 3 rows. So at the end of row 3, you should have 24 stitches. That's it for increasing. Now you can just start single crocheting in each stitch all the way around. We've completed 3 rows, and you're going to single crochet straight or single crochet in each stitch all the way around for 11 rows total. So we've already done 3. You want to do 8 more. And you're just going to single crochet in each stitch all the way around. So each row will still have 24 stitches in it, and you'll still have 24 stitches in the round at the end of row 11. So I'll see you there. Once you've finished row 11, go back to the very start and look at the top of your work. You can see here where my row 1 turns into row 2. There's this little bump. That is what I use as my starting point. You can also stick a stitch marker or a safety pin or something in there if you have trouble seeing the little bump. But that's what I consider my start, and I just run my thumb up and make sure that I work my last stitch on or around the same area so that it's in line with that start point. And that does not change your stitch count. So if you're finished row 11 and you found yourself back here, that's normal, because every time you add to a row, you kind of end up a little bit further back from where you started. So you just add a few more stitches. It doesn't change your stitch count. That puts you in line with your beginning, and that gives you a nice sort of even flat bottom, which we want because he'll stand up nice and evenly if you want to stand him. I might be hanging mine, but anyway, that's the end of row 11. You're going to slip stitch into the next stitch, and then snip your yarn, fasten off, and you don't need very much tail. Pull it back through the loop, Give it a nice tight tug, and you can just tuck it up inside there. You don't need to weave it in because it's just going to become part of your stuffing. So if you want to get it out of your way, you can run it underneath one of these stitches, otherwise just stuff it up inside there. Now we're going to make his bottom. So we're going to continue with the white yarn. We're going to begin with a cinch circle, and the first three, in fact the only 3 rows in this little piece, are the exact same as the first 3 rows of this pattern. So we begin with a cinch circle. You're going to work 8 single crochet into this cinch circle. Once you're finished, you're going to tug it shut, so cinch it up nice and tightly. Then you're going to continue into row 2, working 2 single crochet in each stitch around, just like at the beginning. And then you're going to work row 3, working 2 single crochet into the first stitch, 1 single crochet into the next stitch, and so on and so forth, just like row 3 at the beginning of this tutorial. And once you get to the end of row 3, I'll show you what to do next. Alright, if this looks pretty familiar, it should. This is the first 3 rows that we did at the beginning of the pattern. So if you need help, you can always rewind and watch those 3 rows over again. But once you get to the end of the 3rd row, you should have 24 stitches. And we're going to do the same thing. We're going to single crochet into the next, in this case 3, and that'll bring us up in line with that little bump. See that little bump start there. So I'm just going to single crochet into the next 3 stitches. That doesn't change the stitch count. We still have 24. And that just makes the circle a little rounder. You see that? So now it's a little rounder. That'll keep the shape of our little ghostie nice and round. We're going to slip stitch into the next stitch. And we're going to fasten off and leave a long tail, she said in a ghostly voice, so that we can sew the bottom to our little ghostie. So just fasten off, pull that tail through, pull it nice and tight, and now you can grab your stuffing and stuff the inside of your ghostie body. Once you're all stuffed up, you can thread up that long tail that you left on the bottom of your ghost with your yarn needle. Find the spot where you've sort of slip stitched and fastened off along your body, and this is where I like to join it. So I'm actually just going to stick my needle right in there, draw up the bottom, and that aligns both the fasten off parts, and that's just because I want that kept to the back, and it just kind of leaves all of my little fasten off bits in one spot. And from here on out, you just pick up 1 stitch and the corresponding one on the other side. You should have 24 stitches on each piece all the way around, so that gives you 24 even pairs of stitches to sew up so that you have a nice even round bottom. Once you're finished sewing all the way around, you can make a little tiny knot just to sort of tie off your work. But you only need to do this once because you're actually going to weave in the tail. So you make that knot nice and tight up against your body. And then you can just weave your yarn back and forth or all the way around underneath all of those little individual stitches. So you pick up pieces of the stitch and then just pull the yarn all the way through it, and you can just weave it in and around. So if you have any little spaces or holes that may have developed while you were single crocheting, you can kind of help cinch them shut, and that way you won't have any spaces in your little ghostie. So go ahead, weave in whatever is left of your tail. If you've got a whole lot like me, just weave it in back and forth a couple times and then pull the rest of it inside the body, and it can act as more stuffing. Alright, we have a rounded looking marshmallow here. This is the main part of the ghost body done. Now we're going to put on his little rounded sort of spooky bottom. So grab your yarn and your crochet hook. We're going to begin with a slip knot. Make sure it's not too tight or too loose. And now we're going to do this really nifty little thing by working around the bottom. So because we've sewn our 2 pieces together, you should be able to see where every single one of your whip stitches is. So you see that rounded bit that's going all the way around the bottom? that's a good sort of place to gauge. This is where you're going to be putting your hook. So I start by sticking it in. This is the weirdest part, is the bit where you excuse me, fastened off or started your sewing. So this part might be a little bit tricky, but that's where I like to start. Like I say, I like to keep all my knots together. So I'm going to put my hook through, and by that I'm going through the bottom row of the body, and I'm coming out the top row or the last row of the bottom. So I'm going through both pieces. I'm going to join with a slip stitch, and then I'm going to count 2. So there's 1 whip stitch, here's the next whip stitch, and that's where I'm going to double crochet 5. So I'm going to ignore my little tail because I'm going to weave it in later. So I wrap once, find that space, get that little tail out of there, find the space where my whip stitch is, stick my needle through, so I'm going through both pieces, and I'm going to double crochet into this little space 5 times. This feels funny, so don't be alarmed if it feels a little strange or you have to kind of slow down and take a moment to really see what you're doing. It feels funny. It's a tight spot, so sticking your hook in, grabbing the yarn and pulling it back out isn't necessarily super easy, but once you get a few stitches in there, it'll open up a little bit. So just take your time. What you're doing is working a 5 double crochet fan into that spot. And it is tight, so pack your patience. Good. All right. Once you've got 5 double crochets worked into that spot, go back to the body, look for your next whip stitch, which is going to appear to be close because you did work a lot of double crochets into that one spot, so it might be sitting up funny, but just rearrange it so that you can tell, okay, there's my next whip stitch. So I'm going to skip over that one, I'm going to go to the next one, and I'm going to slip stitch into it. So once again, hook goes through both pieces. I'm just slip stitching here. There we go. And now we start over. Find the next whip stitch. Here it is. I'm going to skip that one. I'm going to look for the next one, and into that space, so through both pieces, I'm going to double crochet 5 times. So skip one, find the next one, put my hook through both pieces, and it's a tight fit. Find the spot that it works, and then work 5 double crochets. And that's the pattern. So you skip a whip stitch, find the next one, and then slip stitch. Skip the next whip stitch, or yes, so find the next whip stitch, skip it, and then 5 double crochets into the next one. So you're just sort of skipping. You want a space basically in between each little piece. So we'll do one more together, and then I'll leave you on your own. Okay, so there's 5 double crochets into that spot. There's my next whip stitch right here. It looks like it's close because this becomes so wide. Skip that one, find the next one, and I'm slip stitching here. Okay, find the next whip stitch, skip that, go to the next one, and work 5 double crochets. And that's it. So work that pattern all the way around the bottom. Take your time. It's a little weird because it's kind of a tight space since it's 2 pieces sewn together already, but it's not a rush. So just take your time, work your way around the bottom, and I'll see you back at the end. Alright, we're getting around to the end here. I worked a fan, I skipped a whip stitch, slip stitched to the next one, and this is what you should have left. So remember, you joined over here. You should have 2 spaces left. If it looks funny, then don't fret. Make sure you've slip stitched and work a fan into the space that appears to be right in the middle. So for me, there's my second whip stitch, so that's the one I'm going to work the fan into. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. And once you're done that last fan, you're just going to slip stitch into the same place that you joined. So you're going to keep all your knots in the same spot. Then you can snip your yarn. You don't need much tail. Fasten off. And you can weave in, so if you have your tail left over from where you joined, weave both tails in around the bottom just like you did the other bit. And then you can wander around the bottom, grabbing each fan and folding it down. Because it's nice and tight in here, it'll create a stiffness for us that will allow the little fans to point down and act as feet. And there you go. But weave in your tails first, and then you can bend down your fans. All that's left now is to put on his face. So, if you're going to put on his button eyes, like I am, you want to pick a side of your ghost that's going to be the front. And this looks good to me. Grab your eyes and position them on the ghost where you think you might like them. Those look good to me. And sew them on. So we're going to use my little trick where we take our yarn, or our thread in this case, through a space between stitches, a couple rows up, come out about where you want your first eye to sit, and thread up the button or the bead, whatever you're using. And don't pull your thread all the way through. Leave about an inch or so, maybe an inch and a half out, because you're going to finish putting on your eyes. We're going to sew on his little mouth, and then we're going to go right back up and out the same place so we can knot our ends together and then weave it in. This way we won't have any knots on the outside of our little ghosty. So go ahead, sew on the first eye, and I'll catch you for the second one. Once you think you've sewn that button down well, and consider who it's going to get. So if you're keeping it for yourself, it only needs to be sewn down a couple times, especially if you're using embroidery floss, because that's pretty strong. But if it's going to someone small, or there's pets around, make sure that thing is on there really, really well, because you don't want them getting pulled off and swallowed. Then you're going to take your needle, go back down, and go all the way out the other side, so where you want your other eye to be anchored. So for me, that's about there. And then do the same thing. Thread up the other button or the other bead, and then sew that one down as well. Once you're done sewing down eye number 2, take your thread, bring it back down inside, so right next to where you were sort of sewing it down. And now we're going to put on his mouth. So decide where you want your mouth. I like to have mine fairly close to the eyes and in between. So I'm going to come out I'm going to work the mouth over this row here. So you can see that my eyes sort of sit opposite each other on this little dent between rows. So that's 2 rows. I'm going to have them work, I'm going to work the smile kind of right over the third row. So there's 1, 2 that the eyes sit on, and then 3. So I'm going to bring my needle out at the corner where I want the mouth to start, which is right here. I'm going to, oh my gosh, he's adorable already. I'm going to lay down enough thread, get a sort of an idea of where I want the mouth to sit, and then do the same thing. I'm going to take my needle and go through the other corner. And because I want this mouth to sit over top of an entire row, and you can see that row right there, I'm going to bring my needle out through the very bottom center on the inside of the thread. So see the thread running underneath my needle? Pull gently, you don't want to pull too tight. And then, and here's the big fancy finish, you're going to go down on the other side of the thread, so you're pinning down the mouth. You're going to go right back through the same little space that you brought the thread out of, and you're going to go all the way up here to the top of the head where we brought the thread in originally, right through the same little hole. So root around with your needle until you find it. You want to make sure you come out right through the same place. There we go, right in the same place. And then you can pull up on that little tiny loop and just fiddle around with your thread until you have a smile that you like. Then you can snip your yarn, or your thread. Knot both little ends together, and I like to knot things together twice when it's a final knot. Once you've got your knot, just take your yarn needle, tuck the knot back through that little space, and then wiggle it back and forth until the whole thing disappears, just like a ghost. And hung in the window, he will spook out your guests. Anyway, these little guys are so cute. They whip up really, really quick, and they're a really sweet little gift for somebody who likes spooky little amigurumi. I hope you had fun making these ghosts with me today, and thank you so much for dropping into the Jayda and Stitches show. We will see you again soon on the Jayda and Stitches show. Until then, stay safe, stay crafty, and have an awesome week. Bye, everybody!